what's the idea of this session? It came up last user group. I just mentioned in one of the chats that this is one way to get off of old hardware. And I think it's pretty easy. I didn't even think it'd take a session, and but we threw it up. We'll just knock an hour out here because it's pretty basic. Essentially, the idea here is you've got some old hardware, or perhaps you're on a VM and you want to go to physical, or maybe more likely you're on a physical and you want to go to a VM. And how can you do that? A lot of ways. I brought up the idea of using a passive and an active site. Would I do it that way? It depends. The situation is really going to depend on what you're doing. There's other reasons you might want to do it. Is some people are afraid of OS upgrades. I'm not. So since the SMS 2003 days, I've just done in-place upgrades, supported or not. They always just work. They're usually pretty boring. Same thing for SQL. I do a SQL in-place upgrades all the time, right over everything, and they just work. They're pretty boring. But some people are afraid of it, or you need a support statement, you can't find it, and you want to just do it, the official right way, or maybe just want to start clean. There's a whole bunch of reasons you want to just get off of one box and onto another. Passive active is a kind of a cool way to do it. So if you're looking at the screen, these are some VMs. It's a lab I have at home. CM1 is the box that they gave me in the lab, and there was no such thing as a CM2, and I made that. And I'm pretending for this lab that that's going to be my my new box, the box I want to migrate to. Well, you can see it's already active. It's like, geez, well, you're already halfway done. All you have to do is retire CM1 and you're done. I'm kind of showing you the end state so that I can kind of revert back and show the two-step. But so there's a lot of things involved with when I first brought this idea up, I thought, man, it's so simple. I'll just tell you how to do it. There's a lot of steps because there's a lot of caveats. Like the first thing is I've got two boxes. Well, this lab had a primary and all of the roles on the site server. I don't know how common that is. I hope you're not doing it. We generally, almost everybody knows that it's kind of a bad practice to have IIS on a site server. You've got SQL there, and that's where your data is, and that's where your brains are. And if someone were to hack through IIS, they could get to SQL and then own your company and blah, 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 blah. But if you have a role server where MP, DP, and SUP, and those kind of roles are off on another box, someone hacks that box, well, that box is not going to be admin of your primary, and they shouldn't be able to get to your database because the CM database basically owns your company. So that being said, the two-box scenario is kind of interesting because it's not all that simple. One of the things that's involved here is you've got to move content off. You can't just, this content library's got to be moved off if you're going to play the passive-active game. So you got to find a place to put that. And so now you're seeing my secret here is that I'm actually even cheating one more step and putting on a new box called CM3, a role server. I didn't test the scenario out where you could say, I just want to keep two boxes. I think you could do it if you say, I'm going to remove the DP role from CM1. I'm going to stand up CM2 and migrate to just that and try to keep a two-box scenario. And I was actually even going to do it. I got that far along in the lab where I had this built out on CM2. I installed IIS, gross. I installed WSUS, and I didn't want to do any of that, but I did it, and I was going to go along that route. But it's so cancerous an idea to me, and it's so horrible. I just couldn't finish it. I couldn't do it in, and I don't even want my lab looking like that. So at the end of the day, I want a role server where my DP, my MP, and my SUP are off on their own. Just don't want those on a primary site. And I thought, I don't know if that's going to help you or not. Hopefully most of you people have offloaded roles. But if you didn't, yes, you could still, you could keep this stuff. If you can afford one VM, for the love of Mike, just get yourself a VM and make a role server and get those things off the CM1. So my CM1 is down here now to just the database server and the provider, CM2, component server, provider. Hey, wait, where's the database? So that's another little trick in the game. So I'm bringing you in mid-story. This is kind of like one of those art house movies. We're starting, I'm showing you in the middle because I couldn't just bring it beginning to end inside of an hour. And now with the diminished time, I really would be up against the wall. So I'm bringing into the middle of the story where I have created, I just went and added a site system role, or a site system server, that was CM2, and I added the role of passive site server to it. And then when I get done with that, I upgraded it to active. So we'll come back to that because I can show you how easy that is. And it's just that it's time consuming. When it goes active, it takes like a half hour, an hour for it to finish building everything out. So this got to run overnight and kind of cook. So what we're missing here, though, still now is SQL. So I can't really. The idea is if I'm going to retire CM1, you can't have SQL on it. I can't still have the database over there. So the idea is I also can do a backup of CM1's database, restore it to CM2, then run a site reset and say, just move my database over to CM2. And now CM2 would be self-contained. He has everything. He's got CM, he's active. He's got the role server split off. He's in control of these other roles. He's running the show on CM3. He's managing all those little components. So he'd be ready now to say, I want to cut off CM1, but I can't do that yet. I got to get rid of the database over there. So we can connect. Again, these boxes are CM1, CM2. CM1 is where the database is at the moment. CM2 is where we want it to go. In preparation, I made CM2 CM1. They're both sysadmins of each other. The idea, and they're also, each box, CM1 and CM2, are also local admins of each other. The whole idea there is just simply, if I want to keep this up, I can go back and forth, active and passive forever if I want to play that game. And so if they're sysadmins of each other and local admins, they can sit there and play that game endlessly in a loop. But if the idea of this session is to say, I want to get rid of CM1. If something were to go wrong in this process, it's still easier if things are set up where everybody's just got rights to each other. If those two boxes have rights to each other. So if say CM2 doesn't have a database yet, CM1 has the CM database. And for that, we just got to quick do a backup. One of the things we talk about is, options. You can see I'm on SQL 2017 here. My new box has SQL 2019. That's not a problem. This migrate just fine. The other thing is this could be server 2016 or server 2012. The new box is server 2019, and that's not a problem. Options. What are the options I did do? Extended properties. Where is it? Change options. Blah blah blah. Anyway, you can see it's on 2017. This server is on 2019. He's also on CU 7, which is the latest, and it might be worth swapping. Let me share my CM2 for a quick sec. So this is CM2. He's on 2019. He's got SQL 2019 installed. And I just want to point, I think this is worth pointing out. Anytime you do SQL, if you can use an any file, you absolutely should be using an any file to install SQL. But one of the best lines in it is just giving it an update source. If you give it an update source, that's where I have CU7 parked. And what
Brian, you dropped out.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yep, we got you back.
Yes, we hear
Yep,
you.
you're back.
So it is worth pointing out that A install with this ini file, you want to get on, you want to integrate and slipstream that SQL in there. And that is, here's where I pointed it to, right? So this document is actually a share. So when I installed it, it went to this and it slipstreamed that in right at birth. Those are kind of important in the 2019 world. You needed to be CU5 for good, nice 2019 compat mode on your database because it's going to become a primary site server. It needs the 80K, and it, of course, for some bizarre reason, they split that up, and now you also need PE. So you get those guys installed so that you can meet the prereqs of CM. Now, let me go back to my CM1. So we got to back this database up. My default is this backup location here, so we'll just say cm1.back. And backup options. I already have compressed backup as my default. Why wouldn't I? Because that's a smart thing to do. Look how fast this goes because it's a pretty small database, got 3 clients, whatever. Voila. So now I have a backup in my storage. SQL backup. There's a backup file, and I need that over on CM2. And now we're just going to restore that database.
Quick question for you. Is CM1 running an older version? Oh, it is. Never mind. I see it in the left panel now.
Yeah, not only that. Look, he's got like this SQL 15 location. Or he's not on the 15 location. He's on the 14 location. So if I check this box, I'm going to say, well, restore to my new location, which is 15. These definitely can, hopefully on a D drive, S drive, some other drive besides the C drive, but this is a crappy lab, so I'll say lobby. But you're seeing this box is really important. This would fail if it tried to go to those other locations. They don't even exist. Hey, this is my new location for my defaults. Bring my data and the log files over to the correct locations. Simple as that. And voila. And now this guy's got an exact copy of what was over on CM1. Now, as we're talking, CM1's database has kind of been changing. Like clients have been reporting in, maybe some hardware inventory just came, or DDR just came, something like that while this is happening. You would have some loss, and you can prevent that by first going to CM1 and doing a pre-inst stop site, but that takes like forever to do. And I'm not going to do that. So it's a lab and our time's limited. And but we do need to do a site reset. So we're on CM1. I've got a copy of this database. I need to tell the site server to start using it. And I think I got to flip back to CM2 to do that. And the location we basically go to, this is where they install it to. This is another thing is like when I'll show you later on when you're doing the move is you can also, if you don't like where CM's installed on your old box, when you do this, you get to install CM to a new place. You get to pick your location to keep things all even. I picked the same location here, but you could move it. Where's it going? bin 64 setup. Is that it? SMS setup. Setup. There it is. Remember, this guy's active now, so we're going to do the site reset option. This isn't scary. But here's the big one. I'm changing sequels, and I don't want to be on CM1 anymore. I want to be on CM2. Boom. That was it. Now you just kind of wait this guy out. This takes a little bit of time. I think the last time I did this in a lab, it took 2 minutes. Not a big deal. He's basically just telling CM's learning how to move stuff over. Oh, that's not good. It works last night, but not in the demo today. Failed. Doesn't matter because it's a lab. I'll figure that out after why it would fail. But generally, the idea is we've just told CM2 he's the database now, and now everything would be moved off of CM1. CM1 would have nothing to do with it anymore. He doesn't have the database. The roles are all moved off to CM3. You could just remove the passive role from CM1. You know, just remove that role, and away he goes. You ship him off and decomment, right? Now we got a little bit of time. I can flip back. You were in the middle of the story. Remember, I'm flipping you back to the beginning of the story. And that's how did I get to that situation? How did I get to that area where I was saying that CM1 was active? To do that, I think I have to do a reset. So give me a second. Find a restore point on these two. Revert. So I just have reset all of them. Got to reshare, I believe. CM1. So now if we look at this, CM1, 2, and 3 all have been reverted. I love Hyper-V, it's fast. So this is the beginning of the story where there is no such thing as a CM2 yet, at least not, the server's built. So I have a CM2 built, and I have all that prereq stuff installed that I told you about. But this is the beginning of the story where you're going to CM and you're saying, I want to build in another server to become. So you see, there's no nodes, there's no CM2, it doesn't exist. And this is simply where we go and say, I want to create a site system server. And this is where we're going to put in our CM2 and tell it all about it. Passive mode site server. Oh, and this is a cool bug I found. And I'd like to know if somebody else has seen this or has this. Anybody ever see this?
It looks familiar.
It's a shortcut. And I think it was trying to like hard link to maybe the easy setup payload. Very bizarre. Because this is really what, you know, this would be in the CD latest thing. My CM 2006 upgrade did finish fine, but somehow this thing went screwy, and I'm not sure why. So if you're going to set up, you know, another server, you also have to use CD latest if you're going to bring it into your hierarchy or into your you know, into your system. You're going to install a role from that. It's going to use those CD latest files. So what I can just use is this location. I can tell CM2 to use this location. It's technically, what would you be? Actually, I think I have a shortcut to speed that up. So that's goofy, but I'm going to cheat and point it to the easy setup payload. Normally, 9 times out of 10, what you can just do is click that first button. It's like, okay, I already got all that stuff in CM1. If this is close, unless you're moving things a million miles away, this first one, it'll just copy it live and then kick the install off. I'll just say use this location. Now, here's where you could change locations and say, I don't want to install CM to that cruddy location. I could, hey, there's a good time to move to a D drive, to DSMS. I love that. I've been using that since 2003. I'm used to it. I like it. So this is where you could change that location. And voila, it goes. And you just kind of basically watch the logs as it installs. Which log? Watch this log. You can also go to the console and watch this one. You see it's installing. You see the show status. He's installing. Once it installs all of that, you've got a passive site server. I would let that bake as long as you possibly can, at least a half hour to an hour before you upgrade it to a active. There's just some crap under the covers that I see, like post installation. It looks like it's all done to you. Give it a little while before you go and make it active. Now there's a few items I wanted to talk about in terms of IIS and such. So when I went and installed the roles, for that CM3, I had to make a DP. This is another opportunity in case you forgot, or you're on an old version of CM that didn't have these. These are beautiful buttons to press. They're just free. They cost you nothing, and they seem to just work flawlessly, 100%. Branch cache is just a nice way of getting free peer-to-peer, and Leadbat is a nice way of getting some free bandwidth control. If you're server 2016, server 2019, maybe your old box didn't have that, right? Maybe you come from server 2012 on your old DP, you get setting up a new one. Suddenly this box will work for you now, where it didn't work for you before. And they're amazing. We use it in production at Big Bank. I think the only thing that we kind of worry about, or I worry about, and I think Mike Terrell worries about, and Mike, you can jump in. Maybe do you have, if you posted anything about branch cache management CIs for cleanup and maintaining some, because the idea is a branch cache is going to have its cache, CM is going to have its cache, and now we're kind of like doubling up on space on a machine. I know that Terrell, at least at Big Bank, has been kind of watching the store for us on that with the CI. I don't know if he's got a blog post on it or not.
Yeah, not yet, Brian, but I'm using some of the CIs from the 2-Point software guys. We are in the works of kind of revamping our active cache management so that we put in for Nomad. We're going to transition that for actively managing the CCM cache and treating it more like a temporary type location, and then the branch cache will be the primary location. But that's yet to come. Stay tuned.
Wow. So we're just like letting that guy grow, but we're not too worried, huh? It's that little of a deal.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, branch cache is pretty good about managing space, and we're going to bump that up even more because we want to keep more of that stuff in there.
Also, I'm talking about a DP, but that Leadbat can work on a software update point, and that's just, I think, 1 or 2 lines of PowerShell, and you can get those off of the 2-Point site too. I did that in production, and I haven't done it in my lab yet, but guess what? It doesn't hurt anything to throw that on your software update point too, because someone's scanning loudly. You don't want to be the loud guy in some remote site, or even a home user for that matter. Leadbat is awesome. I just want to back off if I can. In no way, shape, or form is CM ever meant to get something out in 5 minutes. We're not the people who stand at the line. The people who stand at the line are people getting job done, making money for the company. So we'll be as polite as we can. So I think lead bat on a DP is awesome, and a software update point is awesome as well. I think there's such a thing as putting it on a management point, but maybe one day, I don't know. Also, out of all the stuff that I mentioned, there can only be one service connection point. So in your two-box scenario, if you were to say, I just don't want the headache of a third box, Brian, thank you, but I'll just take the risk. I'm a small outfit and I just don't care and I don't have a lot of time. You're going to have to remove that service connection point off of CM1 and install it on CM2. Also note that when CM2 does go active, it reinstalls all those roles under the covers. And if you ping pong back and forth, and don't do it, never ever go from active to passive, like within 5 minutes or something like that. Give it a full hour to bake before you try to back out, or you can like hose it. I've seen it my lab take all night to recover from trying to go too fast with that. But they give it like an hour or something like that if you're gonna do it. So he's still installing. What else did I want to cover? That was it. I mean, I think those were the big points. I think I shaved off some time by not. We could sit here and watch this by splitting this up the way I did. We're not waiting for this to finish because I wouldn't be able to move on to other steps if this thing's installing. It does take a little time. I don't know, maybe a half hour or something before this guy's up and running. But then you still want to make them active, and that goes another half hour. And hey, we only have an hour to show this, so you know, it's doing its thing. It's cool technology, and if you want to leave it up and running, just know that don't fool yourself to say that this is an HA scenario. It's not, because you still only have one SQL that could go down. And don't think about putting SQL on, like if you do this 3-box system, like you're going to be clever. CM3 is a bad place to put it because your IS is there, and it's still a single point of failure. So yeah, you could have 2 primary sites, but you still only have one SQL. And the only way to get around that is to go with SQL always on. And to do that, you have to have SQL Enterprise. And most people don't have that. So there's just never a lot of interest in people talking about full HA. And then even then, it's not full HA because guess what? These are called active and passive. They're not called active. How does an active, what's HA about this? Nothing. Even when you do the SQL thing, it's close. A passive server would keeps talking to the active, and if it doesn't hear from it for up to a half hour, it's like, okay, I guess I'm going to promote myself, and it will do that. It'll promote itself, but it's still going to need to talk to SQL somewhere. So even for us at Big Bank, while we have this, and we could have up to a half hour failover when the passive updates itself. It has to go and reinstall the MPDP in sub roles. Those aren't like full like installs. All the client bits are already kind of there. It's just kind of a new. If you watch a site comp log, it's just saying I'm in charge of you, and you'll be reporting to me, and you'll get your settings from me from now on. So there's a little outage. I bet you it's realistically more, more like an hour of an outage. And that might sound good to you, and you might have a need for that. But in general, I don't know. I don't know a lot of people playing the game with. Well, that's cool. No more sites. Buggy. I don't know a lot of people playing active passive game, but all my labs and everything like that are set up to it. I'm used to it. It's kind of boring. It's boring. It just works. That said, I can take questions if there are any.
I noticed you set up the new primary before you moved SQL, even though you presented it in the reverse order. Is there, do you think it would be a problem if we were to move SQL to the new box first and then later on turn that one into, say, for example, CM2 to make it a site server? And then, I guess reset SQL.
There shouldn't be, but guess what? There is, because they block it. So if you actually try to go do it, you'll fail when you go to make it a passive, and it's going to say, I already see a role on there. I see a database role on there. I can't touch it. It's like, really? And there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, other than potentially, one way of doing it, again, but it's SQL Enterprise, is if you were to put it in always on group, then it doesn't care. Because then CM2 as the owner, it's just like some arbitrary owner. But in this case, if you were to move it to like CM2 first, the install is going to block you.
Okay, so I should make it a passive first and then just let it sit there and not really do anything because it's passive, right?
Right. Passive doesn't do a thing. All it does is sit there and watch for, is the active guy alive? You just watch a failover log, just sit there and go in circles, and that's about all it does. Doesn't really have a lot of activity going on.
Thank you.
And look, now it's at okay, so it's up and running. Now I could right-click that, promote them to active. I just feel better giving this some time, for the love of Mike. If you can give it a half hour, even do that. If you can give it an hour, even better. If you can wait till the next day, great. But I don't like rushing things, even though the console's telling me everything's up and running. I'm not super confident that it is. But do remember there is a big consideration of that content library. You are going to have to move that off. It does bring up one last little thing that's worth talking about. It's deduplication. So on CM3, if that's a DP, and he already also has the content library, if I put deduplication feature on that server, I can save a ton of space. And we do that at Big Bank, and we're saving terabytes of data. Because if you think about, someone lays down an Office install from one team, and because we're a big company, well, another team wants to put their Office install on their source file, and another one, so we have three, and now they have to go out to the DPs. So I got all these Office 365 sitting around. Well, guess what? With Dedupe, I actually only have one sitting around. And so that's another kind of cool consideration if you're thinking about that content library. If you have to move it, can you make use of deduplication? It's totally a super win. I think, Mike, you ran into some issue. I know that what's not supported about it is, Dedupe is absolutely supported on a DP. Not sure it's exactly supported on the source files, but we do it and it works. And I think the reason it doesn't work is if you use driver packages, old style CM driver packages. Most of the people I know have moved off that to use standard packages and DISM, and that works amazingly well. Everybody seems to have problems with old style driver pack. Not everybody, a lot of people seem to have problems with that. Deduplication would have problems with it. And Mike, did you run into some problem that you had to go do an exclusion for?
Yeah, so we started whimming up our driver packs earlier this year, and basically where the uncompressed versions of the drivers were stored, they were stored on a deduped volume, and it led to some whim corruption. So we actually copied them to a non-dedupe volume before we whim them up, and then we put them back on the dedupe volume, and that seems to work. So that one had us scratching our heads. We were blaming that stupid endpoint protection program of causing issues, but it wasn't. It was actually the reparse points from within the WIM had gotten all jacked up.
So you just excluded WIM files?
No. So
Yeah,
we just
copied
those. Yeah, we copied those drivers down to a non-dedupe volume, create the WIM file, and then copy that WIM back up to our repository that is deduped.
Would an exclusion have worked, like for either a file type or a folder?
It would, but I think there's a lot of redundancies between all the different models that we support, so it's probably best to just have that deduped as well, and then when the WIMs are created, they just get created from a temporary location.
See, this is what I was talking about. Like, why wouldn't I go? The console says I can go ahead and just promote this. It's like I'm still like, well, why aren't you fully green? What are you doing? I'll wait a little while. Maybe this never finishes. I don't know. I bet you I don't know even when it finishes. I'm an impatient person, so I would just wait if you can until that's cleared up. If you can't, you're gunning out of your head. I don't know who you're working for that you have to work that fast. That shouldn't happen.
I put a question in the chat. You're talking about driver packs. The only thing I still use them for is for my WinPE images. Is there another way that I'm not aware of to get drivers into WinPE?
No, not that I know of.
Okay.
But in
Not that I
case,
change them that often, but still.
Exactly, same. We have just a few for PE. And again, for a dedupe volume, I simply just, that folder that they're in, we exclude so that deduplication isn't trying to hit those. But my God, all the other stuff that it's doing for you, it's really a super nice space saver. It's really nice. And we've been doing it for probably 3 or 4 years now. Never had an issue other than Mike's little hiccup. Anything else?
This was awesome. Thank you. That the simple thing about having to make it a passive server first before I move SQL over there probably just saved me a crap ton of headache. Because that was how we were planning on doing it in just a couple of weeks, actually. We're gonna.
Well, you can install SQL first, but you can't do that site reset. That one
That's
you
what I
just
meant,
have to
yeah.
do after, yeah.
Yeah, we already got SQL installed on the machine. We just haven't moved the database yet. Haven't made it into an actual server for CM yet. It's just sitting there with SQL installed and no databases or anything. Waiting for our maintenance time. So, and I think I might have missed the beginning of this whole dedupe stuff. We have some SANs that are obviously doing dedupe. That shouldn't be a problem, right? If we were to put our content library out there on a SAN that probably has some of the same files out there, or at least block level, that should be fine, right?
Not only is fine, I mean, we do. So our SAN team may or may not have said, oh, we do dedupe already. It's like, well, I don't care if you're doing it. You've only allotted me 10 terabytes of space. And to me, I would see all those files would appear to be a lot. I still only want to keep that down to whatever space. So we are on a SAN and we are still deduping it, and they're not complaining and we're happy. I'm not logged into production, but I swear, I think it's saved us something like 9 terabytes or something so far. Now, obviously, we're big, so the data goes up more, and the more data you have, the more it is. But I bet you it's a 60-70% savings on space. We also recently did just delve into just exclusively going with leadbat. So far, so good on that too, as promised. So we made a lot of changes recently, and it's all on SQL Enterprise and 2 site servers, 2 CASs. So all this stuff that I talked about, you could have an active and passive CAS as well. So far, it's never failed over, but we've only been on production in the system for maybe a month or 2. One day it will. One morning I'll wake up and my CM2 will be the guy who's suddenly active all on his own, the CAS, and we'll just be like amazed that it all worked. You can manually flip these, at any time, especially like, and nobody will notice it on a CAS system, like where if I do a primary, I could flip this stupid thing midday. Not a single person's going to know it. And I'm pretty sure I could even do it on the CAS and nobody's actually going to feel it. There's a certain part though, that I think if you leave it for too long, like the next day, people will be like, I can't connect to CM1, what's going on? And that's where the provider is, right? You might say, all right, well, try CM2, and all of a sudden they connect to that and their console opens. So you could run into that issue as well, just heads up. just leave it, anybody's trying to connect, let them know. If you can't, if for some reason you can't connect to CM1, try CM2, see if that's working. They don't have to come and ask. The other thing, there was one last little thing I ran into here is, this lab is offered by the Office Deployment Toolkit. It's a free offering from Microsoft. It runs out, it time bombs, so this is, I've got standard evaluation. This guy's got 142 days left. Well, guess what? Over on my new server, I've got 172 days left. So if you want to kind of keep cheating, this is another way you could keep cheating. If you're really cheap and you can't buy a lab and you don't want to pay for all these licenses, now I can go blow away. I'm not going to retire CM1. I could rebuild CM1. Let's say this guy gets down to, or, the new ones gets down to 14 days left or a week left, right? I can go stand up a new CM1 with a fresh eval and migrate over to it and keep my lab going. Same thing works for SQL. So I don't know who time bombs out first. I'd have to find that out. Any other questions? Oh, wait, I was going to mention, that this lab is free. They update it every time Windows 10 is updated, right? So I guess they refresh this every 2 months. It's a kind of a crusty lab. I mean, I don't know who would, for the love of Mike, put CM on a C drive and all this other crap and IIS and fill it all up on one. It's a cheap kind of a lab, but it's a good place to start, and then you could migrate off to a better built one. So my CM2 could definitely have a D drive and other things, and Dedupe or any other kind of things that I'm thinking of that I'd want to do. The new location, you remember, I could put in that location, so I don't have to live with this bad location anymore. That's a bonus right there, that you could just change that. They also put they don't even use SQL for the software update point. They use a Windows internal database. It's yet another thing to think about. Like if you're building that CM3 box, that do you really want your software update point to have to use a Windows internal database? If you have a real small shop and you you're only thinking like, I just do my Windows 10, I just do my Office, and a couple other things, and I don't have a lot of large numbers, you might stick with that Windows internal database. It's really slow and crusty to me. The more grown-up way to do that is to put your database in full SQL. So, and this might be giving you an opportunity to do the same thing. Yes, you could put full SQL on there, or maybe you point it back to you leave SQL on your primary and just point back to that, whatever kind of option fits in your head. But I just personally am not a big fan of the Windows internal database.
Would there be any problems in having your WSUS on the primary, just so it could use the SQL that's already on box?
Oh, you can. You could do that. Yep, you can do that. Notice, anytime you change this, you could change that root sup. Like in this case, this entire lab has only one. It used to be on CM1. I moved it to CM2 or CM3, and it took about 3-4 hours to do that sync because it's doing a full sync all over again. That entire catalog of 167,000 items, and I'm only syncing 2019, 2010. And SQL 2017 and SQL 2019. That's all I'm syncing in here. It took 3 to 4 hours for it to finish that. Another reason why it was so slow, because where's it populating? Where's it doing that sync to? A crappy Windows internal database versus cool SQL, where SQL you could have nice big files for it to be in, auto growth set right, all the cool things that you get out of SQL. You would sync faster as well.